Good evening. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Garrick?
Here.
Pepcorn?
Here.
Preston? Here. Strand?
Here.
Mahoney?
Here. Fargo Cast Public Health in coordination with North Dakota National Guard and the North Dakota Department of Health performs BINEX Now COVID-19 rapid screening for the general public Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 at the former Faith Journey Lutheran Church in West Fargo. These tests are self-administered and results are received within 15 to 20 minutes via text message. Pre-registration is required. For additional information, visit Fargo Cast Public Health website. Library. The outdoor temporary story walk continues on the plaza near the Sodbuster statue through February 28th, featuring the book Dancing Feet by Lindsay Craig. An online winter readathon program for readers of all ages continues through February 28th, where readers can read books to earn chances to enter prize drawings. Police. The Fargo Police Department Community Engagement Team will participate in Giving Hearts Day February 11th to raise money for the Badges of Unity Fund, which provides the monetary means to offer youth programming opportunities in the community, such as self-defense, boxing, summer camp, and outdoors camp. The Fargo Police Department will also hold a memorial service on Thursday, Friday the 11th at 11 a.m. in the Commission Chambers to honor the life of Officer Jason Mosier, who lost his life 5 years ago in the line of duty. The ceremony is open to the public, but also can be viewed on tvfargo.com and the city's broadcasting and social media channels. Solid waste. This is an interesting one. There has been a tremendous response to the Solid Waste Department's new residential transfer station at the landfill. In its first 30 days, the transfer station saw 369 residents who brought in approximately 41 tons of debris, which included 5,400 pounds of cardboard and 6 tons of scrap metal. There were also about 1,309 pounds of Christmas lights recycled over the holiday season. So that's our new center that people can bring stuff in. It's amazing how many people use it already. Beginning tonight, the City of Fargo is debuting the new way for community members to stay up to date with actions taken by the City Commission during each of its regular meetings. At the conclusion of the meeting, the City will share a commission wrap-it-up across social media platforms that includes interesting topics and actions that took place, why these topics are important, and how they may affect Fargo residents and the community. They will be taken from both the consent and regular agenda items. This is something, the 4 or 5 items are put on there so the public can kind of figure out what we might have done at a meeting. A few weeks ago, I was proud to present the 2021 State of the City to the FMW West Fargo Chamber of Commerce. In the video, 5 main themes were identified that contribute to a strong year ahead for Fargo, including nurturing the heart of our community, working for you, accomplishing big things, striving for everyday excellence, and leading the region. Due to the Chamber's new format, videos were not permitted at the event. However, Fargo produced a video and it disseminated across the social media to promote the successes of Team Fargo. Over the next few meetings, we'll watch individual themes of this video. Tonight, we'll start with nurturing the heart of our community. I hope you enjoy it. I think our communications team did a fantastic job on this. You'll see a lot of pictures and different things in it. But at the Chamber event, we could only talk for 10 minutes, so Greg and his team has a 25-minute video, but we'll only see segments of 5. This is Dr. Tim Mahoney, the Mayor of the City of Fargo. The year 2020 has been one like no other across the world, and that was especially true in Fargo. Through unforeseen and unprecedented challenges, this community has continued to shine. Let me show you how your Team Fargo has never stopped, nurturing the heart of our community, working for you, accomplishing big things, striving for everyday excellence, and leading the region. Our community stepped up and exemplified why we are the big city with an even bigger heart in 2020. In March, when we were faced with the potential flooding, thousands of volunteers produced 232,000 sandbags in only 4 days. It's so humbling to see the overwhelming support when we face a flood fight. Matt Bus began fare-free operations in April of this year, understanding the financial strain and challenges faced by its passengers. Operating without fares will continue into 2021. Following the riot in May, several small businesses in our downtown neighborhood were vandalized and damaged. The same flood-fighting resolve and support we have witnessed countless times was on full display the next morning. The community embraced unity and with the help of some members of Team Fargo, had the downtown cleaned up before lunchtime. The people of Fargo never cease to amaze me. The criticality of race relations in our nation and in Fargo was brought to the forefront in 2020. In addition to our existing and excellent relationships, this year introduced us to new grassroots community organizers who seek to improve our metro. This has led to opportunities for dialogue and understanding. There will always be work to do on the path of becoming more inclusive and more embracing, but we look forward to that work and the continued partnerships from across the community. Through the donation of private funds, Our Lady Liberty has made her triumphant return to greet the Main Avenue travelers in 2020. The new Statue of Liberty has improved security features to ensure she continues to shine as a beacon of our community for years to come. That wasn't the only new shine in Fargo. Advanced illumination as part of the overall City Hall project was installed and implemented on the exterior of the Commission chambers in 2020. The new dynamic lights help to signify holidays and special events while modernizing the heart of our city. Near or far, Team Fargo is here to serve. This was especially true when several members of the Fargo Fire Department joined other departments from North Dakota fighting raging wildfires in Oregon. 3 Fargo firefighters volunteered to spend several weeks in the West, sometimes working 20 hours a day to protect critical infrastructure. A little closer to home, the Department of Planning and Development engaged with the public to learn more about advancing our core neighborhoods plan. This comprehensive plan will guide development in our city's central neighborhoods, which truly are the backbone of Fargo. Fargo's downtown neighborhood will see a fusion of infrastructure and public art as the downtown Fargo Mega Water Tower is constructed next year. Not only will the tower replace Fargo's 3 oldest water towers, providing more efficiency and saving taxpayer money, it will also feature public art that was developed based on public input. The Human Relations Commission will be expanded in 2021 with 2 additional members offering guidance. This marks a continued commitment to ensuring the diverse and eclectic Fargo community is represented, heard, and provided an important seat at the table to make real and substantial change. This year we also saw the launch of our Community Land Trust. We are proud to partner with the non-government organizations for the greater good and to improve the lives of our residents. Good job, guys. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the January 25th, 2021 regular meeting and the January 29th adjourned regular meeting?
So move. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 34?
Move to approve.
Second? Second by Gary. Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Garrick?
Yes.
Preston?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. We go to our regular agenda. We have resident comments. You are allowed for 2.5 minutes to comment, maximum of 30 minutes total residents. I have virtual speaking to Cassandra Schmidt. Are you online?
She's not yet on.
Excuse me?
She's not yet on.
She's not yet on. And we have Alexander Simon. I think he's here today.
My name is Alexander Simon. Again, repeating everything else I've said, asymptomatic spread of COVID is a hoax, therefore you don't need a mask. If you want a mask, wear it. Change the word, please, from mandate to recommended, not required. And I know things changed, and I know some of you think there's no enforcement. I'm supposed to go to jury duty tomorrow. I can't wear one, and they're telling me I have to. So they're going to enforce it. For weeks, I wasn't able to come into the building without one on. So that's enforcement. Can any city employee take theirs off and not be concerned about getting fired, including police officers that are outside most of the time or alone most of the time? So from what I've seen, there's enforcement. And that's my problem. Recommend it, please. Business owners have hidden behind the immunity you've provided, saying there's no enforcement, but do they get penalized with restrictions or maybe a liquor license removed or maybe they don't get licenses renewed? That's enforcement. That's fear. Let them choose. Let the free market be free. I'm not contagious. If I was, I'd be at home. Let us decide for ourselves. I've already had it. And besides, it's none of your stinking business what my medical records say. I'm not hurting anybody. Make it voluntary again. And why are there rules saying, I have it printed out, the state mandate's over. Members of the public will be required to wear masks within all city facilities at all times. Why? I want to serve. It's the first time I've been able to be on a jury. I want to do it. I can't do it with a mask on for many reasons. Thank you.
I hear that Cassandra Schmidt is online now. Cassandra, you ready to go? The timer will start once you start. Cassandra? Is there a glitch there, Ty, or no?
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Oh, sorry about that. I was having trouble connecting.
You can go ahead. We're waiting for you.
Sorry about that. You still there?
Yeah, you can start. We're waiting for you to start.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear I couldn't hear you. Okay. So my name's Cassandra Schmidt. I was born and raised in Fargo. I operate a business here in town. I've got 3 small kids in daycare, and tonight I'd like to address not only the commission, but the Fargo community and specifically parents. Over the last year, I've become increasingly concerned with where we're headed as a community in regards to parents' rights. For instance, I'm not allowed into my kids' daycare unless I wear a mask. My oldest will be 5 soon. She'll be required to wear a mask if I choose to keep her there. And this was not the daycare's choice. This was mandated by the state. The staff and the kids are required to comply if the daycare would like to continue to receive emergency funding. Prior to the mandate, no one wore masks there. Not the parents, not the kids, not the staff. No one told them that they couldn't. They decided for themselves that they didn't want to. Now we have no choice. If I want to keep my child in daycare, she'll be forced to wear a mask. I'm her parent, but her health, the health of her peers, and her daycare staff is now the state's decision. When she goes to school in the fall, it'll be the school board's decision. I've got some questions for parents tonight. The CDC's own study states that 7 out of 10 positive COVID cases wore masks all the time. So as a parent, do you believe that the masks are protecting you, your kids, or anyone else? The majority of the parents I've spoken with do not. But the propaganda is that we need to do it for others. I don't need to do it for others. They can do it for themselves. They can wear a mask. So those of you who don't agree, what are we teaching our children when we force them to do this? We're teaching them to comply, whether they believe in it or not. So if you believe that your mask is protecting you, then by all means wear it. But I don't believe that that's anyone else's decision to make for my child. That's the parent's decision. And if you believe that with me, email me at letparentsdecidethat@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher Call, I don't see him here. We'll close the public hearing. We'll go to public input opportunity, or am I too early? Oh, did you sign up?
Yes, I did online, and it said it was accepted. Glenn Knutson.
I know who you
I-
are. No,
I signed up
Kimber said it wasn't accepted.
It said I came across my computer, you've been accepted for
I think we have
tonight's
time
meeting.
there if we do more.
Yep, let's go.
My name's Glenn Knutson, and I'm glad to see that the city commission tonight is going to be addressing from the Cass County health issues in reference to COVID, the impact on people's lives. This last week, I was very distressed to see a 15-year-old young man committed suicide in our community. This man had everything to live for. According to his obituary, I did not know him personally. He was involved in athletics at school. It appeared that he was well liked at school. And I believe that our young people in our community, as well as our nation, have been extremely stressed by what has been happening with the COVID virus. My granddaughter was riding with my daughter in downtown Anoka, and my daughter cannot wear a mask due to medical conditions. The state of Minnesota has been much more strict than North Dakota. My granddaughter asked her, "Mommy, are we going to die? Because we're not wearing masks." And my daughter said, "Look around. Do you see people dropping dead on the streets? Don't worry. There's only a small percentage of people that will die from this virus. You don't have to worry." I had we have a couple that moved from Minnesota to our church in Fargo because in Minnesota they weren't allowed to go to church. They had to wear masks everywhere they went. They came to Fargo, and no sooner had they moved to Fargo than the mask mandate went into place in Fargo. The woman told me when she moved to Fargo, the reason we moved here, I was becoming suicidal in Minnesota because of all the pressure and everything where I went, and I couldn't really wear a mask and shouldn't have been. You need to stop and consider the health of the community, the families that are being torn apart, young people that are committing suicide, all over a disease that less than 0.5% of people that get it will die. And there's certain areas of the population where that percentage is even less. I have a niece that is doing not well in school because half the time she's online and half the time she's in school. And the Fargo School District has adopted the mask policy. I just looked at the map today. North Dakota is all green. Cass County is green. We're at the lowest positive cases since August 17th, 2020 per day. We're at the lowest rolling 14-day cases since August 24th, 2020. Please consider stopping the mask mandate. You said you would on the 18th of February. I trust you will. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Faith Dixon, and I want to just encourage you all to start talking about vaccines. We need the community to be on board so that we can stop the spread of this horrible virus. I don't care what newspapers say, TV. I have lost tons of loved ones. It's not hitting the community that stood up here today and that talked on that TV. It's hitting us. And if you care about your people in this community that might look different than you, wear a mask. Please, us and the people of color, the community, we're going to be starting educating ourselves and having a nurse go around and educate the community on vaccines. I urge you to help us. Help us push it out for the people of color in this community who need it. Our lives matter, Black lives matter, and we ask you for your help. Thank you.
Now I'll close the public hearing. We have public input opportunity for Section 5307 Federal Transportation Administration Grant Preliminary Program of Projects in 2021. Julie Bummelman is to talk about this, Julie, right?
Yes, correct.
Thanks.
I gotta stand where Greg wants us to. Yes, good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. This is more of a technicality than anything, but we have a requirement that we publish what we'll be doing with our grant money this year. And so it should be in your packets, the breakdown of how we're gonna spend it. This is money that's awarded every year through the Federal Transit Administration, DOT, and the local match was put in the transit budget. This is in addition to the 7.9 million that we got from the CARES funding, which was 100% federal and a nice windfall for us. But anyway, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do you anticipate the funding going up any further, Julie, or is this all we'll get for this year?
This is it for appropriations so far. There is, with the new administration, President Biden, there's talk of another $30 billion for transit, so we'll see how that comes out.
And it's already in the budget, our local share of 1.7, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, correct.
Very good. Questions by the commissioners?
Do you need approval?
We do, we just have to ask for public input first. Does anybody wish to speak to this federal funding, City of Fargo? Anybody wish to speak? If not, we'll close public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? MetroCog went over this as well. Dave, did you guys go over this? The MetroCog? No?
Yes,
You did say. Okay.
or either that or the MAC coordinating.
Yes,
board, I
Matt
forget.
Gordon. Yeah. Thank you.
One of them.
Roll call vote, please.
Garrick,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye.
Thank you.
37, COVID update. Desi Fleming, are you on?
I am on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We're seeing COVID cases in the state and Cass County continue to decline, as is the amount of those who are now seeking to get tested. Today's results has Cass County at 101 active cases. The 14-day rolling average positivity rate for Cass County is around 2.27% and the state around 2.7%. Hospitalizations have decreased significantly. However, there has been a slight increase over the past week. Currently, there are 40 individuals hospitalized across the state. They have also started specialty clinics in our area for those that are dealing with long-term effects of COVID. There have been 192 deaths in Cass County and 1,428 total deaths in North Dakota. We do continue to see new COVID cases along with some small outbreaks in our area. The public health message would be to continue to practice the mitigation efforts of wearing masks, physical distancing, avoiding crowds, and hand washing while we work to vaccinate more of our population. Fargo Cass Public Health remains very busy and our pandemic response is far from over. Our focus has shifted more to vaccine distribution, although we continue with other efforts as well, such as logistics for testing, consulting on restart guidance, and contact tracing. As of yesterday, there have been over 29,000 vaccines given in Cass County, with 69 enrolled provider sites in which vaccine is being distributed. Fargo Cass Public Health has given approximately 1/3 of those doses, or 9,952 total vaccines. We continue to vaccinate in the 1B group in order of priority, along with providing second dose clinics. Since February 2nd, we've been co-located with Sanford and Essentia at the COVID Community Vaccine Center located in the old Gordman's building site. My staff are doing a great job providing excellent customer service and an efficient process and deserve many kudos for their efforts. We appreciate the community being patient as we make our way through the priority groups. And again, as I like to remind all, we encourage everyone to consider vaccination for COVID when your priority group is up. Make sure you use credible sources when you're reviewing vaccine information so you can make an informed choice. Thanks.
Desi, just a question. I know you're going 75 up, then 65 up. What will be the next grouping then? Would it be people with medical disease under 65, or how will we prioritize that?
The next group would be that with the little lower age group with the chronic medical.
Thank you. Any questions, Desi? Commissioner Preston?
So Desi, just so we're all clear, 1B is what? 65 and older with medical conditions? I think there's a whole listing, actually.
Yeah, there is a whole list. So it starts with the 75 plus, and we just got a report from the state health department for numbers for that age group. So in Cass County, we've done about 42% of the 75 plus age group. So we still have a pretty long ways to go. We've done about 15% of the 65 to 74-year-olds. So those are the two top groups that we're trying to work through. And like I said, we are doing our best effort to go in order of priority. Obviously, there's teachers in this group, there's childcare providers in this group, but they're a little bit farther down in the 1B grouping. So that's, I guess, why we ask for patience. We have a lot of folks in Cass County population-wise, and so we're just trying to get through them as best as we can.
One more question.
Go ahead.
Desi, is there, related to the comment made earlier, are there efforts specifically to get out to the communities of color in the community here?
We are just, on our intake form, I guess I don't know that there is any question regarding race. I think any business entity that has an interest in vaccine can certainly call our office and see where they might fit in the priority groups. There's nothing in the priority groups from the state specifically that identify race.
Let me clarify what I was asking. Is there some education, some outreach happening with the communities of color?
Okay, sorry, Arlette, I misunderstood that. So we have had we've done some work during the COVID pandemic with specific entities to help get information out. So those efforts, we can have Holly check on that, our communication specialist, and see if we can get some stuff out on the vaccine. We have it on our social media, on our website, but if people don't have access to that, then we could see if we need some translated material as well. But Family Healthcare is also working to vaccinate. They are one of the provider sites as well to vaccinate their clientele as well.
Commissioner Garrick?
Well, I was going to ask. Sorry. I was going to ask if we're given the numbers, are we going to remove the emergency mandate for Fargo?
Pardon me?
The mandate for Fargo. Are we going to remove that given the numbers?
Well, it goes off on the 18th.
And
We don't, if you wanted to have herd immunity, we're not up to 70%. And as far as DESI goes, we haven't got as many vaccines out as we'd like right now, 29% out of 235,000 population. So
the answer is no? The answer is no?
we were going to just let it go off the 18th.
I move to remove the mandate now.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Gehrig?
Yes.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Strand?
No.
Preston?
No.
Mahoney?
No. Mr. Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. Desi, I'm just curious, and it somewhat connects to Commissioner Preston's question about BIPOC populations and people at risk, but I'm going to come at it a little differently, and it's just my curiosity. With the closing down of Lutheran Social Services, has that had any impact on public health's ability to reach out to that community of immigrants and refugees and people of color and people at risk?
You know, I think for our vaccine effort, we haven't noticed that at all. We haven't, I guess, been receiving any feedback from the community as well. If that is an issue, we are working on congregate settings. You know, is coming up for us shortly as one of the priority groups. So we are working to meet with the jail and various, you know, shelter settings, things like that. So we are probably capturing some of that groups in the other priority groups, but has there been a specific effort to that? There hasn't from public health, just because that hasn't been a directive from the state health department. And that's kind of where we're getting our direction from. We can make some local efforts and work with, I know we've worked with the Shira a lot for early on in our task force, so we could reach out to them and see if they have any anecdotal things for us to, you know, strategize around as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Desi. Update from Fargo Cass Public Health and the Fargo Police Department on escalating drug use, overdoses, and deaths in the community. Robin Lykestall and Police Dave Zablowski to speak to this.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm here this evening to present the drug-related death data for Cass County. And what I'd also like to provide this evening not only is to illustrate the increase in drug-related deaths using our Cass County coroner's data, as well as discuss trends in drug-related deaths, and also to demonstrate the increase in opioid overdoses using Fargo Cass Public Health's Syringe Services Program reversal data, and also to review increases in SSP participants, visits, and naloxone doses distributed as possible indicators of increased drug use, and to provide Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommended actions. As you see here, this is a look at our opioid-related deaths in Cass County. This is data from our Cass County coroner, 2013 through 2020. Please note that the 2020 data is preliminary, but as you can see, since 2018, from 2018 to 19 and then 19 to 20, we have seen increases in both years. We've seen a marked increase in our meth-related deaths. As you can see here, we have compared our opioid-related deaths with the meth-related deaths, 2016 through 2020. And as you can see, they kind of flipped. In 2016, we had twice the amount of opioid-related deaths, and then in 2020, we had twice the amount of meth-related deaths. So we've seen kind of a flip here with opioid and meth-related deaths. This is a look at all drug-related deaths, excluding alcohol. So this would just be all illicit drugs, as well as prescription drug misuse deaths. And as you can see, we had a marked increase in 2020. We had 57 up from 38 the year before. But as noted before, we did have an increase from 2018 to 19 as well, but a smaller increase.
Robin, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
If you go back, what happened between 15 and 16?
Okay, so 2016, if anyone lived here at the time will probably remember that is when we saw a lot of opioid-related deaths in our community. That's kind of when the opioid epidemic hit Fargo, if you will. We saw many opioid-related deaths. We saw many in short amounts of time, and we saw many young people die. Luckily, around that time, especially in 2017 and 18, we implemented widespread distribution and training of naloxone. And we can see that in our opioid-related deaths here. We had a high of 31 in 2016, and we were able to cut those almost in half by 2017 by implementing some of those measures.
Can I follow up? So what about 15? Why were the numbers so low in 15? Any idea?
I have asked our coroner, our present and our past coroner, and they've said it was an anomaly, that it was just a really weird year, and it really wasn't representative of what typically happens here. We did see low numbers, I believe, those years as well, when it came to the total amount of drug-related deaths as well. So it was just a strange year, I guess. And then lastly, if we take a look here, these are our alcohol-related deaths. And as you can see here, we did see quite a bit of an increase from 2019 to 2020. We did not see that increase from 2018 to 2019 like we did with opioid-related deaths, meth-related deaths, and drug-related deaths. We actually saw a decrease of one. But it's important to note that alcohol-related deaths are probably always have been and may always be our number one cause of death when it comes to drugs. It's alcohol. And if we take all other drug-related deaths and add them together, our alcohol-related deaths are still higher.
Mayor, I have a question about that.
Yes.
Are we talking about DUIs? Are we talking about what are we talking about?
Good question. So when the coroner categorizes a death as alcohol-related, it is either an alcohol poisoning or it is a death by injury where BAC was 0.08 or higher. And it also does include individuals that would have died from chronic alcohol use disorders, such as deaths from cirrhosis of the liver, for example. Yep. And then this is just a look at all of the increases. So from 2019 to 2020, we showed increases in all categories, with meth-related deaths being the highest at a 75% increase. Drugs, like I said, illicit drugs, misuse of prescription drugs, that was a 50% increase, a 31% increase of alcohol-related deaths, and a 27% increase in opioid-related deaths. Now, this is not strange or odd if we take a look at what happened in our country. This is a look at the percentage change in 12 months for fatal drug overdoses between June of 2019 to May of 2020. And all of those states there in red, including North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, and our friends in South Dakota, all of those states experienced a 20% or greater increase in fatal drug overdose deaths. So what's happening here is happening, unfortunately, all over the country. Now I'm going to take a look, or show you actually, our syringe services program participant reported saves in 2019 and 2020. And what this refers to is individuals that were able to reverse an opioid overdose reversal using naloxone, which is also called Narcan. And so if you take a look here, in the lighter color, we have the saves from 2019, and then in the darker color, we have the saves that were reported in 2020. It's also important to note that these saves are self-reported, and so we believe that they could be underreported because they are a self-report from participants. And it's also important to note that this was Narcan or naloxone that was provided by Fargo Cass Public Health at our syringe services program. So we saw a lot of lives saved as a result of this program and of the Narcan and naloxone that has been made available to us through the State Opioid Response Grant. And this is a look here at our Narcan distribution or naloxone. Narcan is the name brand for the drug naloxone, which reverses opioid overdoses. This is a look at distribution at our syringe services program in 2019 and 2020. And again, the lighter color is 2019, the darker color is 2020. And as you can see, we peaked here in June and then again in December. Those were two very busy months for us in 2020. Last month, we had another record month. Actually, it was the number, we set a new record actually. We distributed 566 doses of Narcan or naloxone in January. And this is a look at how many visits participants made to our syringe services program in 2019 and 2020. Again, the lighter color in 2019, the darker color are the visits in 2020. You can really see in March that number shot up and really stayed very high all the way through the rest of the year. So we've seen quite a bit of need, and luckily we've been able to still serve our participants. Even though we've been in the middle of a pandemic, we've still been able to serve those participants, thank goodness, because I think if we wouldn't have been able to serve them, we could have had a lot more drug overdose deaths in our community.
Mayor, I have a question about that.
Yes.
So we have many people in the community, and I'm not one of them. I believe in the program. But we're seeing an increase in the amount we're distributing. We're giving out more and more, but we're seeing higher deaths. So how can we say this program is successful if we're giving out more treatment, but we're seeing more deaths in just a year's span? It's not a small amount. It's pretty dramatic when you look at the graph.
So that's a really good question, and it's something that I have yet to explain. And that is that when it comes to meth overdose deaths, we do not have an antidote for that. So Narcan or naloxone is not successful for those meth-related deaths. So that's why we saw that number of meth deaths go way up. Our opioid deaths went up by just a few, more than we would have liked, but just by a few. And so I think it might be safe to say that had we not had the naloxone or the Narcan, that those opioid-related deaths would have gone much, much higher, just like we saw the meth deaths.
And again, I'm one of those people that voted for this, and I think I'm hoping it would do better. But I'm hoping to see better numbers in the future, because this is one of those things that people show me and say, Tony, you're wrong in being supportive of this. You're encouraging drug use. You're just making people feel better about doing it. So I'm hoping in the future we see better numbers,
So I think actually greater participation could be seen as a success. More people coming to us, the more people that if people participate in a syringe services program, it's been shown that they are 5 times more likely to engage in treatment, and that they are 3 times more likely to be successful. And it's also shown that people that engage in syringe services programs actually end up using less drugs and actually injecting less, and that syringe service programs have actually helped in a number of other ways, but those are just some of the highlights that I'd like to give. So hopefully the more people that come to us, the more help we can provide, and the better numbers we'll see in the future.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. And Commissioner Garrick, it's also important that we add to this discussion of harm reduction that we have significantly diminished the spread of HIV and hepatitis in our community. That's a real big play. There was a county in Indiana not that many years ago that had 4,000 cases of HIV in a short period of time. That's dirty needles. So it's not just what we see, it's also the public health in other arenas as well, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And Cass County actually did see a reduction in the number of new HCV or hepatitis C cases in 2019, and we had opened our SSP in 2018. And for 5 years prior to that, we'd only seen increases. So we're hopeful that those hepatitis C numbers have trended downwards as a result of this program as well. Thank you. So I think that we can surmise or we can theorize that perhaps there may be more individuals in our community, at least, that perhaps are injecting drugs, because those are the individuals that we see at our syringe services program. And to see these numbers increase so significantly, it is possible that more individuals are now injecting drugs than had been before. And obviously, I think that is borne out in those numbers, those overdose numbers as well. So yes, it's very possible that we are seeing higher usage, but because they're coming to us, we are working with them to, find alternatives to more usage, and to hopefully our end game is to get them into treatment and to be successful at it. So I just wanted to give all of kind of the increases that we've seen in our syringe services program. So we've seen a 51.6% increase in the number of visits from 2019 to 2020. We also saw a 42% increase in unique participants that were served in that program from the second half of 2019 to the second half of 2020. We saw a 39% increase in the number of naloxone doses distributed from 2019 to 2020. And we had 155 self-reported opioid overdose reversals the second half of 2020. So that's potentially 155 lives that could no longer be with us, but that are here today. And in 2019, we had 200 self-reported opioid overdose reversals in that entire year. So these are all of the increases. So in addition to the increases in the drug-related deaths, we have seen increases in the services that we have been providing and in the supplies and services that have been needed at our syringe services program. So there are some CDC recommendations for public health departments as a result of all of the increase in overdoses nationwide. The CDC recommends that we raise awareness about the need for bystanders to have and use naloxone, that we raise awareness about the changing illicit drug marketplace, and especially with illicitly manufactured fentanyl and novel psychoactive substances, that we raise awareness about the co-use of illicitly manufactured fentanyl and other drugs such as meth, and raise awareness about mixing of illicitly manufactured fentanyl into drug supplies of meth and other drugs. It's also recommended that we increase awareness about the risk of using drugs alone and emphasize harm reduction strategies for people who use drugs, including during the pandemic, meaning continue or serve these individuals during the pandemic. It's very important. Some of these harm reduction strategies could include not using drugs alone and knowing what drugs are being used, ensuring that naloxone is available and that people who use drugs and their loved ones know how to administer it, and having a friend or loved one check on people who use drugs, especially during use. It's also recommended that we provide messaging to community groups, particularly to those serving high-risk populations, community leaders, school officials, faith-based leaders, parents, students, and others about the changing illicit drug supply and risks for overdose and exposure to highly potent opioids, such as fentanyl or counterfeit prescription drugs. It's also recommended that we link those at risk with care and we track their retention in care, and that we consider expanding peer navigation programs or recovery coaches to intervene with high-risk individuals. And I do have a source here if anyone's interested in reading the CDC's Health Alert Network advisory, including these recommendations. So in summary, I would just like to say that all categories of drug-related deaths, it did increase in Cass County in 2020. This was a national trend. Opioid and drug-related deaths also increased in 2019. Meth-related deaths increased in 2018 and 2019. And in 2016, opioid deaths were nearly double that of meth-related deaths. And in 2020, the opposite was true. Alcohol causes more deaths than all other drugs combined. Fargo Cass Public Health Syringe Services Program has experienced significant increases from 2019 to 2020. And in response to national increases in drug-related deaths, the CDC issued recommended actions for health departments, healthcare providers, first responders, and public safety departments.
Commissioner Gehrig has a question.
How much of this can we attribute this increase to COVID and the response that the government has had to these things, staying at home, being isolated, kids at home, mental health, childhood hunger, the suicides we've seen, things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so suicides, drug-related deaths, alcohol-related related deaths are called deaths of despair. And those have been increasing for a number of years. However, there was a much more dramatic increase during COVID. And we can definitely, hypothesize that the reason that we've seen higher deaths is because of, some of the unintended consequences of COVID. Not being around others, people losing their jobs, people having health problems, losing loved ones. Yes, all of the heartache that people have experienced and all the frustration that we all have experienced during 2020 can definitely be considered one of the main reasons we've seen that dramatic increase.
Commissioner Gehrig had a follow-up, and then Commissioner Strand.
Yeah, and it's just a statement. I want us to remember when we're talking about the health of people, wearing a mask, being socially isolated, not going to school, not going to your job perhaps. It's much more than the physical health of a person. It's the mental health. It's it's childhood hunger, it's homelessness, it's all these other things that we're not talking about. And these numbers, I think, display that. People using drugs, people who are disposed to doing such things, who otherwise be at work, are not at work. They're doing other things, and they're doing bad things, and they're hurting themselves and others. So when we talk about mandates, when we talk about closures, and we talk about so many people at restaurants and things like that, it's not just about the economy. It's not just about work. It's not just about people going and doing what they usually do. It's about these other things that affect people pretty dramatically. And I think we're seeing the numbers rise in large part, if not completely, because of the reaction that we've had and the government's had in general to COVID. So as we contemplate the mandates, as we contemplate extending these things, also contemplate the effects we're having on people.
Commissioner Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. Robin, just to add to the discussion briefly, you've touched on so many elements, but could you also make a notation of the medical assisted treatment and how that's working, the methadone clinic, and if that's what role that plays in this bigger picture?
So medication-assisted treatment is evidence-based treatment that uses medication to help individuals with opioid use disorder specifically. And that is another reason that I believe we are not seeing dramatic increases in our opioid-related deaths, because there is medication-assisted treatment, and it is currently being funded by the state's state opioid response grant. So anyone with opioid use disorder can go to a medication-assisted treatment facility or the opioid treatment program, get methadone, Suboxone, those different types of medications, and the state will actually pay for that if they don't have the funds to pay for it or if their insurance doesn't cover it. So that is another great success we have here, and that's another reason why meth is very concerning. There is not medication-assisted treatment for meth, and there is not Narcan for meth. And so we really have a huge problem here. I think we're just on the cusp of it, and we have very little solutions for it.
Mayor, just the quickest, dumbest question in the world. How do people die from meth? I don't know if we know what it looks like, what it smells like, how it behaves in front of us.
So that's a great question, and we did a social media post about that a few weeks ago, and it was this long. And what it's actually called, the term for it is overamping. And basically, someone doesn't know, overdose is different for meth than it is for opiates. Someone that takes an opioid at a specific amount, their body is going to do a specific thing. With meth, your body isn't always going to react the same way. Your body could react to meth differently if you're having a bad day. So it's really difficult to know where that overdose point is, because it could be different with anyone on any given day. And so that overamping looks like a list this long, but in the end, it is usually heart problems, stroke, heart attack, things like that. So it would be hyperthermia is another way of just overheating or dehydrating. Those are ways that people can die as a result of meth use.
Commissioner Preston?
Two questions. One, actually for the police chief, but this one is for you, Robin. The CDC recommendations that you had up on the last screen, has there been much done around those in the community?
So those were just released about a month ago.
Okay.
So they're brand new, and they are in response to this alarming rise
Okay.
in.
How do you see some of these being addressed?
So in looking at them, I think two things really stand out to me personally. So this is my opinion. What stood out for me is, number one, we need permission to start talking about these things. Some of these things are oftentimes left underneath a rug or in a dark alleyway and not brought out into the light because it's just not pleasant to talk about. So we as a health department need the permission to be able to talk directly to individuals who use drugs and be able to say these things and be able to talk this way to our entire community without having to apologize and say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking about an unsavory topic. No, we're talking about people's lives. And so we really need that permission. That ultimately comes from our leaders. And then the other thing that really stands out is there's a lot of this work that we can do more of right at our syringe service program, right through our mobile outreach program. So I think if we just beefed up some of those programs that are already there and had more staff to have more conversations and have more time to provide services to these individuals, we could expand on what we're already doing and cover a lot of these or improve upon a lot of these recommendations.
Let me just say, it would be helpful if you could put those thoughts down on paper. And in fact, there was a small group that met a few weeks back, and maybe if we draw that group back together to try figure out a plan of action, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay. My other question, sorry, one more question, was for the police chief. Chief Zabolski, the meth use. We talked a lot about opioids, but with the lack of something to reverse meth and with the increasing usage here, or the increasing deaths that we're seeing, are you seeing meth labs? Are you finding the supply side?
No, and we're not actually seeing meth. We're seeing polydrug mixtures, fentanyl, meth, cocaine, heroin, all of the above. So we have a lot of the fatalities in the toxicology reports have a mixture of these types of drugs. Fentanyl is another one where Narcan is not necessarily going to help you. Fentanyl is very lethal. So we're seeing the polydrug mixture. In fact, there's a report that just came out of the University of Cincinnati this week. That's the greatest issue with impaired driving is polydrug mixtures with alcohol and marijuana, alcohol and cocaine, alcohol and heroin, alcohol and meth, alcohol and fentanyl. And that is the number one issue with impaired driving, and they were able to show that through their research, which is another issue that I think all of us try to deal with.
So you're saying you're not seeing meth as?
We're seeing mixtures. I'm not seeing solely meth. No, I see mostly fentanyl mixed with
Okay.
other things.
So Robin, when they're classified as meth deaths, is that oftentimes a combination, or how do they determine if it's a meth death? That sounds terrible. A death from meth.
So our county coroner uses toxicology reports, and some of the toxicology reports come back with combinations, definitely. But, and I'd have to double check on this, but I think that they take, the coroner takes what they believe to be the number one,
Okay.
driving force of that death, and they take that.
Usually the highest level is what could be lethally kill the person, so they try to keep it specific if they can.
That meth is coming from somewhere.
Mexico.
Yeah,
Okay.
and actually, and so I think Robin would probably tell you, it metabolizes differently also. So depending on how soon you get that toxicology or how long has that person been deceased before they draw that blood, you can lose some of the toxicology pieces. Heroin dissolves very quickly in the system. So I could be heroin, and at the end of the day, by the time I get to toxicology, I'm not seeing that. I might see some form of opiate or something less than pure heroin. So again, this is the best info that we have, but again, it's affected by circumstances on the ground. How long was that person deceased and what does the blood show? We're not seeing any meth labs. We are seeing a huge increase in fentanyl. In fact, our department has seized in the last 2 months over 600 M30 pills, which are pharmaceutically produced pills. So these are drug traffickers who are very advanced to the point where they create pills that look like you bought them in the pharmacy. They have a number stamped on them, but they contain fentanyl. 600 pills in over 2 months. And so our fatalities and overdoses that are known to the department, these are just the overdoses known to us that our department responds to, have been on the rise since 2019. Dramatically, they went up in 2020. We had a total of 91 with 18 fatalities. And to Commissioner Garrick's question about COVID, I think there may be some relationship, but when I just look at our numbers, comparing 2019, the first 3 months to the first 3 months of 2020, pre-COVID, we had 10 overdoses in 2020, the first 3 months, compared to there were 6 in 2019. So the first 3 months of 2020, we were increasing pre-COVID. So far, January of this year, last January, we had 1 non-fatal and 1 fatal, 2. We've had 13 in January of 2021 and 2 fatalities. So the numbers are continuing to go up dramatically. And again, as Robin said, more usage and the harm reduction. We only know what we know. There's many more overdoses that are occurring that we don't know about. Obviously, when people become deceased from that, it comes to our attention more often. Our officers have effectively utilized Narcan 5 occasions in January of this year. But again, it's the fentanyl pills also coming from Mexico. They had a large fentanyl seizure 2 days ago at the border. Border security in terms of narcotics is going to be an issue going forward. We know that we have a lot of people heading to the border. We've spoken with our federal partners, and this is going to be a concern for increased drug trafficking opportunities as we go forward.
Commissioner Pipcorn.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. That's my question. So these are all illegal drugs. So where are they coming from, and what are we doing to stop that?
Well, our department we're part of a task force that has state and federal partners. So that we work on those cases as we can. A lot of these overdose cases involve members of our narcotics unit in terms of the investigations themselves. And when we have evidence and information that we can work with, we pursue those. And then if we can take a case federally, we will go to the feds because there's a higher penalty for a drug trafficker under federal law than there currently is under state law. We're not always able to get a federal connection.
Commissioner Preston.
Just one more question, and that relates to, oh my gosh, it is gone.
Enforcement, usage, no? Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. For a lot of years, we've been told, for example, that marijuana is a gateway drug. I'm wondering this, is alcohol in fact maybe the gateway drug? When, somebody has suggested to me in the past that many of our communities, even aspects of our own community, are alcoholic personality communities. If we had less alcohol, would we have less illicit drug use, less openings, fewer opportunities, lessened inhibitions? Or is there a connection there? We don't talk about alcohol much in our community, except for liquor licenses and things like that. Is that the elephant in the living room?
Well, I don't know if there's any strong data to support that in terms of drug addiction and those types of issues, perhaps. I could tell you this, adding other drugs to what's already legal would most certainly make a already precarious situation worse. And that would be, I guess, a concern from the public safety standpoint of we have enough to deal with in terms of what's legal and the illegal drugs that are already out in the market and their adverse effect on our community members.
Mr. Preston.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, did you?
If you had a magic wand, what would we do?
Well, I think number one, the harm reduction strategies are very good. I think they're important. I think the fact that their usage is up, but the overdoses are also up doesn't mean that harm reduction has failed. I think that what it means is we're in the midst of another big surge in trafficking, and I think people who are addicted are obviously more susceptible to purchasing that next greater high. So once addicted, you're a future victim by someone who's trying to make money in the trafficking arena as opposed to just, using on a daily basis because that's all that you have to do at the moment. We need more treatment facilities. We need definitely, I talked to Robin earlier about this, the SUD funding and that ran out mid-year last year. Something that allows for longer in-house treatment for people addicted, especially opioid addicted individuals, which I believe would also include meth in that mix of addiction because it's so physiologically addicting it's nearly impossible for them to become unaddicted or have any chance on their own volition. And they really have to be in a house for a period of time to get detox and get into some kind of a program to manage that addiction and then hope for some level of success. So I think it looks like we're kind of short on that end as well. And then, of course, I think we really need to take a strong approach on these traffickers who are bringing in these illicit drugs for the sole purpose of criminal enterprise.
Commissioner Preston?
I do remember what I was going to say, and it wasn't a question. In relationship to John's comment about alcohol, it's a much more difficult conversation to have because it's a legal drug, but it is a drug. It's a substance. And it's something that we've had conversations for the last 20 years. I remember in 2000, we had a task force, a mayor's task force across all 4 communities, and came up with a bunch of strategies, but, nothing ever happened with them. So, when you look at the deaths overall, alcohol is an issue. Yeah.
Right. I think it's a little bit of a different issue, if I may, though, in terms
It
of
is.
this. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we're recovering all kinds of illicit drugs in these search warrants that are very harmful.
Chief, you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Take a 5-minute break, come back at 6:11. We'll call the meeting back to order. Item 39 is request for tax increment financing for the development of industrial park along Cass County Highway 20. Jim Gilmore to explain.
This is a request for tax increment financing for a proposed industrial park on the area north of Cass 20, east of I-29. The proposal is for a $53 million industrial park with approximately 643,000 square feet of space. The request for tax increment financing is for $5.25 million. I should go over our process with TIF is that this initial review is to see whether or not you feel it is potentially eligible and whether or not you want to do a financial review and draft plan for future consideration. So we're not asking for approval, but more a preliminary look to see if you feel it would meet overall objectives of the city and would be appropriate or not before we would spend a lot of time on it. And so what I'll first do is have Paul Hyde from Hyde Development is going to be available after I go through a few of these slides. And then also if you have any questions regarding overall economic development and availability of industrial space in Fargo, Ryan Oshheim from the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDDC is here to address any questions on space. So first of all, I'll show you the site. You can see that up by the interstate in Cass 20. We've actually worked with Hyde Development before, so this would be a similar type set of buildings. In 2015, we worked with Hyde Development on a redevelopment project on the corner of Main Avenue and I-29. This particular site, there was a lot more blighted conditions, and you can see in 2018, 2 large warehouse buildings had been constructed to replace those older buildings. This particular site would be 3 buildings, each averaging probably a little over 200,000 square feet. You can see the site plan here. They look very similar to those ones if you're familiar with them at I-29 and Main Avenue. And maybe right at this point, I'll have Paul Hyde talk about the project a little bit if you're available online, Paul. And then you can, happy to answer any questions that, Paul will be able to answer most of the questions, or if you have any questions for me. So, Paul, are you available?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you see me, Jim?
Yeah, we can see you now.
Okay, great. Thank you for the time, Mayor Mahoney and members of the Fargo Commission, for being able to present to you tonight. This is our second redevelopment project in the city of Fargo. Jim's referenced the first, and Jim pointed out that we'd be adding almost 650,000 square feet of new industrial product on the site, which we believe will translate into 320 new jobs and over $50 million of private investment. We will use this increment, if granted it, for 3 tasks, really. Number 1, to demolish old farmhouses and abandon wells and septic systems on the site. Number 2, to import soils necessary to lift the buildings out of the floodplain. And 3, to provide support and soil correction for the clay soils, and then support for these buildings to give them the super flat, super level floors that we require to gain primary sector businesses looking for space in Fargo. Why is that the case these days, and what's different? What's really different is how these tenants are operating in these spaces. They're using things like laser-guided forklifts, automated picking machines, and sensitive medical device manufacturing operations that require these super flat and super level floors. And those floors without this soil correction move on that Fargo clay. And that means we won't be a suitable home for these primary sector businesses. Our buildings also feature precast concrete walls, which provide superior insulation and building security. They were key for us getting both Pioneer Seed and other businesses at Butler Business Park because it provides security and safety they need to get their licensing to operate in those buildings. Not every company needs this kind of space. Others could go to what you might call more of a wrinkly tin building. But the clients and the tenants that we're chasing need this kind of space. We've got to provide that Class A space for them in Fargo. We've seen it work before at Butler Business Park. I've mentioned Pioneer Seeds, Loeffler, Hirschfield's, Fastenal, all new companies to Fargo because of that project and that type of construction. And we're seeing early interest from both agribusiness and medical device, medical manufacturing users interested in the space that are inquiring because of the type of product we're proposing to build. So we've got to be able to deliver that type of product in order to land those leases. Someone might say, what happens if we don't grant any TIF? That's a very fair question. What we're using it here for is to address the unique features of this site, which is the demolition of the old farms and septic systems and water wells, but addressing those site soils and the site floodplain unique to Fargo that we need to level the playing field and make us competitive with other markets. We're active in Minneapolis and in Denver, and these rental rates and these users these days are very sophisticated, and they know what it costs to be in each submarket. And we would have to mark our rates up by at least 75 cents to $1 a foot, which is the moon in our little industrial world. And that means they're going to pick another spot in another location. So we're trying to be competitive with the market that they're looking at, and that's the nature of our request. Thanks, Jim. Happy to answer any other questions.
Any commissioners have a question? Tony, you'd already asked your one question you usually ask, but go ahead, Tony Garrick.
Well, Paul, thank you for considering building in Fargo. We all appreciate that. You've put some engineering into this. You've put some thought into the soil and the development that has to be there. So as a business, you've spent some money considering those things. How much have you spent as a company looking at this site versus other sites?
Well, once we're all in, Commissioner, it'll probably be $250,000.
So you spend some significant dollars looking at that.
That's significant to us anyway.
Oh,
Yeah.
certainly. It is to me. That is to me for sure. And I'm not at all poo-pooing that. So you're talking about a $50+ million building or development, I should say. What's the contingency there? What's the percent above that you would be willing to pay, right? So when we build a road in Fargo, it's a $50 million road. We say, well, a 12 or 15% contingency on that. What's your contingency on top of that?
Yeah, by the time we're closing and ready to sign the contracts, Commissioner, it's probably 1.5% on a project this scale.
That's low. That's much lower than the government.
Well, hopefully we're good at it.
More efficient than us? I agree with you. I think the private sector is always better.
Yeah, that's why we spend the money up front, is to tighten that down at the end.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that the private sector is always more, but is always better than the government doing those type of things. So are you telling me that without this $5 million TIF, I read this in the paper, that you wouldn't build here in Fargo, you go to Denver or Minneapolis?
It's more that the tenants we're trying to get here, we've seen them in Denver and Minneapolis, Commissioner, and they've said, we're interested in Fargo. And they know the rates. They're getting the same rental rates there that we're proposing here. So for us to back in and deliver those same rental rates with the type of construction we're looking for, we've got to level the playing field. That's why we're asking for the increment.
I don't think you answered the question, so I'll say it again. If we don't offer the incentive, would you move to Denver or Minneapolis instead of Fargo, or somewhere else outside of Fargo?
We wouldn't build the project in Fargo.
Right. So what's your 1-year ROI with the incentive versus without?
I'd have to look at that. We're right near breaking even. Usually we're around 7-8% is where we are. First year, it depends on lease up, depends on rental rates and lease term and that kind of thing. But that's usually where it is.
Paul, it sounds like you have tenants. I'm not done.
I know that.
It sounds like you have tenants already. So your 1-year ROI with the incentive is 8% or without?
No, sir. We don't have any tenants yet. The nature of these buildings, we're going to have to build them speculatively, Commissioner, which means we build them without tenants. We hope that we see some birds circling, but like the 2 buildings in Butler Business Park, like the buildings we built in Minneapolis and in Denver, they're all speculative simply because the tenants don't leave themselves much time in order to land into space by the time they need it.
It's interesting because you said before you have tenants. So the 1-year ROI is, well, I think you heard is 8%. So with an incentive, it'd be higher. So basically you're saying to the city of Fargo.
Well, that's assuming the TIF, sir. That's assuming the TIF,
Okay,
Commissioner.
so less. So, okay, fine, less. The ROI for Fargo is 0 for 15 or 20 years or however long the TIF lasts for. So as an investor, no one in this building no investor in Fargo would invest in anything that gives a 0% ROI for 15 or 20 years. But that's what we're asking the city of Fargo to do. We offer you $5 million, you pay 0 property taxes for that time. I know you pay property taxes, but it goes right back into your development, which is how a TIF works. So we're basically being held hostage. So either you allow me to have $5 million and not pay taxes, not go to the school, the park, the county, the airport, vector control, or the city at large, or we allow this development to happen. Someone will build here, and I hope you do. I hope you build here because you'll make money. Amazon is going to be directly north of you. A $100 million plus development is going to be directly north of you. You will make money in Fargo. Trust me, you will. So no, we should all vote no against this. This is speculative, obviously, but it's speculative to the city of Fargo as well. And our ROI is far worse than your ROI would be, and no one would ever invest in it as the city of Fargo. You should. You're going to grow. You're going to do well. You have in Fargo in the past, and we should all vote no.
Just for the public to understand, what's being asked for tonight is a study on the TIF. So Paul wouldn't have all the answers back until the TIF study is done.
They've studied this. It's a
Excuse me?
business.
No,
he knows
no.
what he's doing. It's a $55 million development. You tell me he doesn't know what he's doing?
Mr. Chair, can we follow the rules?
Oh, yeah.
Are you not going to, do you not, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Garrick, do you not have to follow the rules? Everyone else does except you?
For a mask.
Mr. Gary, I'm just going to tell what the public is. When we ask for a TIF study, we ask for a study to answer what the return on investment is with or without the TIF. Paul can give us our data and the data he has, but it's actually an outside observer goes in and does that, number one. Number two, they will pay taxes on their land that they own. The improvement is what they don't pay the tax on. They get the TIF. And so when we're doing these TIFs, it's only 1.5% of our property values. It's not 60, 30, 40, it's 1.5% of all taxable value. So when we're giving a TIF, we're trying to promote some growth and development in the community.
It's 0% if they do it otherwise.
Mr. Chair?
Which they always do.
Mr. Chair, can we follow the rules? Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure, Pepcorn.
So first of all, I'd like to go back, if Mr. Hyde, if we could show the project that we did, the Butler Park, if you could do that, Jim, because I wanted to thank Mr. Hyde, and I think you and I voted on that, Mr. Chair. That was an excellent thing. If you look at those 2 buildings on the lower left, I think those are what he referred to as wrinkly tin buildings. And if you drive there now, it's right along the interstate and Main Avenue. That turned out so well. And I think that makes a very positive impression of our city compared to the tin buildings that were there before. And so I want to thank Mr. Hyde for doing that, because I think that's, and I was very proud to participate. We voted in favor of that. I think that's a big improvement. But I will say, however, with this next project, there aren't a lot of, I would say, poor buildings or anything like that in this area. And so I will not support a TIF in this area. I think it would be a great project. But if you look, there's a couple of buildings, and they're farmstead type buildings. And so to me, it's not nearly the same impact, and so I will not be in favor of that. I agree, it's a great site, and we would love to have buildings that he builds, but for us to use TIF money for that, I just won't support that. Thank you.
Mr. Preston.
Yeah, if I could just indicate where I'm coming from as well. This is really stretching it in my mind to basically bring in soil to prepare the site. I'm not going to support a TIF for that.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. What I see is that we're losing sight of the policies for these tax exemptions and incentives and programs that we're offering. We've had a lot of TIFs go through lately with 3-2 votes. You know, and that tells me our policy isn't right. We don't have it exactly the way it needs to be. We're telling the public we offer TIFs and pilots and these exemptions and incentives, but then it comes to us, it might get voted down. You know, I think we need to get on the same page. I think we need to have a broader discussion, and I know you had one about the Mid-America Steel site, but we need to have a broader discussion, and we had agreed several months ago when Commissioner Preston was new that we would have a discussion about incentives and taxes and targeted breaks, but we haven't done that yet. So I'm concerned that our policy isn't clear. I think we're using TIFs willy-nilly these days, it seems. It's just almost like free money. And I'd rather have it be policy-driven. You know, how do you define blight? A couple farmhouses and some septic systems? You know, I don't know. Is a TIF really intended to bring in 5 feet of soil? Is that what a TIF is for? And then you look at the Oak Grove site. I mean, we're just all over the board with TIFs. So my recommendation is let's quit bringing these forward until we have a clearer discussion about all of these incentives, moment present, going forward with who's on this commission now. Right now, I'm hearing this TIF won't pass. And I think that the policy is what we should talk about.
Commissioner Strand, the policy was worked on for 2 years, and it could be brought back up at this time. What came out of the policy, somebody could request a TIF, we do a TIF study, and then to come back to the commission. So we're not quite following the policy on that, because this person could request a TIF. It may not pass the thunder when you go through a study. We only did 2 TIFs last year. We're not giving them out willy-nilly, so we don't have a lot of TIFs that come through this commission. It's 1.5% of the property values in the city of Fargo. So we don't give all sorts of TIFs out. Return on investment on TIFs has been 30-1. So we've gone from $30 million worth of value to 300. So it has come back in more taxes that come to the city. So we've talked to Paul. Jim Gilmer, we're going to need a motion here in a minute. Do you want to finish up?
Yeah, you can bring this up on the screen. This is the tax increment financing policy. We have actually 3 different policies, one for housing projects, one for mixed use, and one for commercial projects. So some of the things we look at is, does it meet at least 5 of these 8 objectives? The ones I've highlighted in green, I think that this particular project meets those objectives. The 2 you've been talking about, whether or not there's sufficient brownfield conditions or blighted, I think those are the ones that are in question on this particular project. But so what the committee would do is look at these objectives. Does it meet these objectives? But then also, probably even more importantly, as the mayor mentioned, we would send this to our financial reviewer. They would look at the rate of return. Do they really need the money, or could this project be feasible without the TIF? So these are sort of the 2 major questions: is the financial feasibility, and does it meet these objectives of the city? And you know, perhaps in another meeting we can go through all the other objectives for the different types of projects. And this is what the tax exempt committee looks like.
Commissioner Garrick.
Ben Hushka's been retired for a while now. We've got someone new there. We got a new commissioner. We should have a new meeting about these things. It's a whole new commission at this point. So I'll make a motion that in 1 month's time, we have a meeting to go over the incentive policy for Fargo, give a month for the staff to get that in order. And we have a brown bag a month and whatever, on a Wednesday, 2 days from then, to get that together.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, if I could speak in support of this. Since I am the new one and I'm looking at this list, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I think having a meeting would be a really good one.
Any other discussion? We'll work with staff at the time of the meeting. Roll call vote, please.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Pepcorn?
No.
Preston?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye.
I'll make a motion to deny the study on the TIF.
Is there a second?
To deny the TIF?
This
Is that-
TIF that we're talking about, item 39.
Deny the study.
Yes.
I'll second it.
On this TIF.
I'll second it.
Moved in second. Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Garrick,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Mahoney.
Yes. Next item, applications of property tax exempts for improvements made to buildings. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Strand,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Garrick,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. Recommendations for appointments and reappointments to the following boards and commissions: City Hall Auditorium Commission and Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Preston,
Yes.
Garrick,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Legislative update. Bruce Grubb to lead us through this with Mike Redinger.
Thank you. On Friday, we emailed the latest master bill tracking list and the bill hearing schedule for this week. We're not planning on covering all of the bills because this week there are 34 bills from our master tracking list that are being heard. We did have a department head meeting last Friday following the North Dakota League of Cities legislative call. We looked at all 34 bills, of which 10 of those rose to the point of having testimony being recommended. And so Mike has done a nice job of extracting the 10 of the 34 bills being heard this week and asked him to quickly show those to you tonight with the staff recommended positions on that bill on those bills to get some sort of indication whether that's supported.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners, for the time. Up on the screen, as well as the laydown item in front of you, is a summary of the bills that have been identified this week out of our 193. We have several that are up for testimony this week. First, I want to thank our staff again for their availability, not only tonight, but as well in preparing the city's position on the various bills. You will see these are in chronological order on the screen and on the laydown item in front of you. This is actually just laid out Monday through Friday. We had one bill that was up already this morning. This was an item that was requested by the Human Relations Commission, as well as one that was supported by the Police Department. Testimony has been submitted. I just want to add as well that our FTP site that you've previously received a credential for and a login for, that testimony has been placed there today. And then on Thursday, you'll see that that's a pretty busy day for us. These are items that I'll just very briefly summarize. We have items from the Planning Department, the Police Department, Finance, and the City Attorney's Office. And I'll just very briefly summarize those, starting first with Senate Bill 2232. This was an item in support of a Juneteenth observance. That is in support from Planning and HRC. House Bill 1293, which comes up on Thursday and again on Friday, is a item that was flagged by the Police Department regarding carrying of firearms or dangerous weapons. Senate Bill 2046 is an item that the Finance Department is recommending support. This is a bill that we feel is important in that this will increase both the employer and employee contributions to any PERS, both by 1% on the employer side and the employee side. House Bill 1367 is one that it was identified by our Finance Department to oppose. This is regarding preliminary budget timelines and a voter referral piece of language that was inserted in a bill that we oppose. I'll flip to the next slide then on 1379. This is one that the Finance Department has indicated support for. This is the timing of state aid distribution, which currently occurs on a quarterly basis and would be shifted to a monthly distribution. That's something that we are in support of. House Bill 1383 is one identified by the Police Department for the city to oppose, limiting enforcement of federal firearms laws. House Bill 1248 is one that also has been identified by the Police Department and the City Attorney's Office, one that we would recommend opposition to. This is also regarding the prohibition of firearms and dangerous weapons. And then finally, 1305, also up on Thursday, from the city attorney's office. This relates to the access to the attorney general's office for opinions. And so this is one that the attorney's office is also recommending opposition. And then finally, on Friday, House Bill 1324 is a bill identified by the engineering department as one that the staff recommends opposing. This relates to the exercise of eminent domain powers and authorities. So those are the bills up for this week. Again, it is a little bit of a busier week. Our staff are here to answer any questions that you have on any of these items, but we are certainly happy to answer any questions you have as well. Thank you.
Any questions about Commissioner? Commissioner Preston?
Just a question about, there's, I think, 3 items in here relating to firearms, and I tried to interpret one of them. I can't figure out what it's all about. So if somebody could explain those 3. And I think, Mike, you indicated one of them was opposition, but I'm seeing monitor on all 3.
Correct. These are items that have changed since this initial list was put together. The screen that's in front of you, these are items that have been identified to oppose.
Sorry.
So, yep. And I'll have the police chief come, Commissioner Preston, answer the question that you raised. Thank you.
There's too much coming at it. Thank you for clarifying that.
Go ahead, Commissioner. And I would agree that the array of bills is hard to follow, so I'll do my best.
Why don't you go right through them? 1383.
Okay. 1383 would prohibit our officers from assisting federal law enforcement regarding the investigation, prosecution, or enforcement of a violation of any federal statute or regulation related to regulating firearms, a firearm accessory, or firearm ammunition, unless the federal agency appealed to the district court of the county first regarding the possible violations, and the court finds probable cause that a national security threat exists. This is largely impractical and would greatly hamper the efforts of our department. As we spoke previously about our partnerships with our state, county, and federal law enforcement entities, we are often involved in investigations with them that do have some or all to do with firearms regulations. We have people who are trafficking narcotics who are convicted felons, and they are possessing firearms. So have not had the opportunity to speak with the sponsor to find out what the intent of the bill is, but it would definitely hamper law enforcement's ability to work with our already existing task force, and from a practicality standpoint, doesn't seem like a very viable bill.
House Bill 1248.
1248 adds in, there's a related bill, actually, 1339, that relates to this also. There's my 1339. There we go. I guess the easiest way is actually to start with 1339, which takes the definition of dangerous weapon and eliminates pretty much everything except a knife with a blade over 5 inches. So what would currently, under current law, be considered a dangerous weapon, like a switchblade, a gravity knife, a machete, throwing stars, metal knuckles, etc., that is taken out of the definition entirely, and the only thing that's in there is a knife, something that would project a bomb, or something that's capable of producing or emitting noxious liquid gas or substance. So that definition is changed, and in 1248, this is an additional prohibition for local law enforcement, local entities to prohibit these things during declared emergencies. So in a situation where we had the May 30th riot, we were prohibited by law in terms of prohibiting the carrying of firearms, but we could prohibit the carrying of dangerous weapons, some of these things that I've just listed. This adds into that we would also be prohibited from prohibiting dangerous weapon for those who are attending or under a state of emergency or during a protest or riot type situation. So it would be, in addition to the firearms, dangerous weapons. So in essence, anyone could carry just about anything for the duration of those events.
So the other two that I was more interested in, because there's very little explanation on the form here, 1293 and, oh, they're both 1293. How come that's listed twice?
Right. 1293 changes, and again, these are all, the changes that these individual bills make affect each individual bill, which is why it's so complicated. They change the definition in one bill, and then they change some other wording in another bill regarding that definition. So it's difficult to figure out what the overall the proponents are trying to accomplish, but 1293 basically, it looks like, takes away some of the constitutional carry requirements and allows, they add language in, someone who is not otherwise prohibited by law from possessing a handgun. And they could carry them in churches with approval of religious leaders there, etc. An individual who's not otherwise prohibited by law from possessing a handgun, and they've taken out from prohibited to retain a Class 2 license. So they're changing some of the licensure, or I think some of the actually, there was a piece in here that required 1 year of residency to be a constitutional carry person. It appears from the reading that that part is struck. So I think unless you are otherwise prohibited, meaning you would be a convicted felon or convicted of a crime of domestic violence, or someone who's been committed to a mental health facility, it looks like you would no longer have to be a resident for a year to be a constitutional carrier. You could just carry immediately. So you could also choose to get the licenses which give you other state reciprocity. So that's what 1293 looks like to me.
Commissioner Gregg?
I don't want to have testimony for 1293. I don't understand it. Therefore, I don't want to put my name on it. So I think we should stand silent on that. If everyone else wants to, that's the majority, that's fine. But I don't think that we should say the entire commission supports it. It should be a 4-to-1 or whatever it's going to be to support it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify. So it says monitor. The testimony requested, would it be to clarify the intent, or what kind of testimony?
Well, I'd like the opportunity to clarify the intent. We haven't had that opportunity yet. It's been difficult to get a hold of some of the legislators, obviously, with their schedule.
So that would be the purpose of the testimony?
Well, actually, prior to testimony, I would try and make contact with the sponsor of the bill. I just haven't been able to do that yet.
So what would the testimony contain, I guess is the question.
It depends on what the intent of the bill is, because honestly, in this particular bill,
Okay.
I think that's what it says. But
Okay.
until I talk to the representative, I'm not really certain myself of what is trying to be accomplished, other than taking away the 1 year of residency, which is a whole other question, I guess.
Commissioner Gregg?
So Arlette, to your point, I don't know either. That's why I'm saying I don't want to put my name on it, right? If you guys want to, that's fine. But I don't know what is going on in this. So 4-to-1, that's just fine. You can send your testimony, but I don't want it to be unanimous because I don't know what this is.
So he is going to do testimony. You say you want to monitor?
I'm saying that if you all want to have him send testimony, that's your right as a majority. I would say that I'm a downvote. If everyone else is an upvote, he can send it, but I don't think, from my perspective, he should. But that's up to everybody else.
So how many commissioners are in favor of him sending testimony? One, Commissioner Pepcorn?
Mr. Chair, we don't know what it is. I think that would probably be important, but to me, once we clarify it, if you can, we don't need to have a special meeting. If you can just send an email or whatever we can do to inform us, I think that'd be good. But at this point, we don't even know what the bill says because they change. So is there some way we can do that just so we know what's going on?
Commissioner Strand?
I'm on the same page. We're just spinning with information we don't know. You know, this whole process of discussing legislation in this method,
Well, the difficulty we have is testimony has to be done this Thursday, so us as a commission either have to say tonight, Chief, please send us their testimony. If we quote vote on that, that's an open meeting violation, so the issue is if he finds it that it's something we need to oppose, Does he have permission of the commission, or does the commission want to vote on it once we get that and we pull a special meeting?
Mr. Chair, I think we have to rely on our staff. If that's his professional opinion, then that's what you got to go with. If it comes up later that it doesn't agree with something one of us feels, then that's fine too. But that's the staff, that's their expertise, all these different departments. And so I think we need to rely on them a little bit. I think it would be a courtesy to just to update us as to what the bill says. I think that would be good. But other than that, to have us have to vote on each one of these, I think what John said is true, that we're just spinning our wheels. A lot of this it's in motion as we're meeting. Thank you.
So I take from that discussion, we allow the chief to send us what he's going to send in testimony, and he would submit testimony.
And that's fine. And if I may, I think maybe to help the commission, because there's so many interrelated bills, that you might want to read ahead on House Bill 1311, because that bill will specifically affect you as elected officials and public gatherings. And many of these bills interrelate in different ways. But certainly that's one that I don't think has been scheduled yet for hearing, but it will be coming up. And I guess I would suggest you read ahead on that so we could have that discussion.
Okay, next slide, Mike, or is that all the slides?
Mayor and Commissioners, that was the end of the presentation for this evening. These are the 10 bills that were identified by staff. If there are any other comments, we're certainly happy to answer any questions, but these are the positions outside of 1293 that we would like to take this week with written testimony.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. My sense of this is if we have a policy or a practice ongoing in the city of Fargo, our staff and our people will represent that in Bismarck to the best of their abilities. So if somebody's talking about upsetting that apple cart and changing those laws and affecting our policies locally, to me, that's when we step in. But if something's just reflecting what's, in my head, I expect our staff to reflect what's already going on in Fargo to the best of their abilities. I don't want to micromanage the words that come out of their mouth or the words they put into a testimony. All I care is that it either honors what we have in place here, or if it doesn't honor it, then we talk.
Commissioner Garrick.
And I respectfully totally disagree. Like if the police chief is going out there to Bismarck and saying the city commission thinks this, and that's who I'm representing, and it's only two of the five or three of the five. I've had this happen to me numerous times in my career as a commissioner, where they say, we think this. And I'm like, no, we don't. We don't. You might, the mayor might, the majority might, but I wholly disagree with giving more incentives. I don't want the Renaissance Zone to be 100 blocks. I don't want that, okay? So if the commission is sending out, Jim Gilmore or Bruce Grubb to go to Bismarck without my say-so, I'm gonna speak out. So I don't want to leave leeway for the police chief or the fire chief or Bruce Grubb or anybody else to say, here's what the commission thinks. We don't think that. You might, the majority might, but I don't. And we should have an up or down vote each way. And you should be on the record, I should, and everybody else should be on the record saying, I support or don't or oppose these things, or I don't have an opinion, and the legislature should have their vote. So I want these things. Otherwise, I'm going to keep sending letters, and people will get upset that I'm using letterhead.
Commissioner Strand, you want to respond, or?
I don't. I'll say this, if I wanted to be in the legislature, I'd run for the legislature.
Mr. Chairman, Eric here, raising my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just thought, since you were talking about 1248 and Chief Savelski was talking about the dangerous weapon change that's in there, I just thought I'd call attention. You've already talked about this and given direction on it, so I'm not asking for anything. But this is also the bill where we're dealing with the firearm cities being prohibited from having a zoning ordinance involving firearms. This is that bill we talked about approximately a month ago. So just that's on the.
That's 1248?
Correct.
Okay. That's the one I was.
So just for the commission, I know Commissioner Gary voiced a different opinion, but I think our present stance is if it follows policy of the city of Fargo, we will have staff members giving testimony. So unless we specifically call out a bill and bring it to this commission and say, I want to bring this bill up and vote it down, we won't give it. Present policy is that our staff does go out and testify. So we have an eminent domain issue. We may have engineering go out there because it sets up problems for us and different issues that we have in the community. If there would be a TIF bill, I would suppose what would have to do is come to commission, and if you wanted to vote on it, a commissioner could do that, Commissioner Garrick. But this thing does move too fast. There's a lot of things that move, and just as Commissioner, as Chief, he was responding, those bills change. People take things out, move things in, do different things, and every time that change is made, you have to be flexible enough to figure out, okay, do I like this or not like this? Ken Costin has the NEPERS bill, which is a 1% and 2%, but there's other ones that are more egregious, have 5%, and have big amounts of money that are put into the NEPERS, which we would object to because it affects our employees. So those are some of the things that, unless you have a different policy, we did recommend a policy at one time that is following what I think is a policy. I can send that to all you commissioners and see if it's to bring back. But your particular sequence, Commissioner Garrick, that you talked about, I don't think is our present policy. Commissioner Garrick.
And that's fine. If no one else agrees that we should talk about these bills, then I'm the only one, and that's a 4-1 vote, isn't it? So that's the majority rule. For the record, I'm against 1248 then. If they're prohibiting the legal sale of firearms, then I'm not for that. I'll do it myself. I will bring up each bill then. I'm going to meet with you guys. Now we have a new job to do. I'm going to meet with you guys every week, and we're going to talk about every single bill, and I'll put it on the agenda before Thursday at noon. And we're going to have that meeting. So that's what we're going to do from now on. So regardless, this is happening.
Well, I'm thinking we're already doing that right now. We just gave all the bills that are having hearings next week. You got the list of all the bills that the city has prepared. Every one of you commissioners can look through the list, and if you have something that's an issue or concern, you can bring it up to the commission. There's no problem with that.
So, Mr. Chairman, do you want a motion just supporting the conclusion or the comments that are made here? Do you want us to just pull out what we don't agree with and
I would say what you don't agree with.
Okay.
I'd rather not make it cumbersome to Commissioner Strand's comment. We don't want to be the legislator. We want to be the city
sounds
commission. So, any other items, Commissioner Bruce Grubb? You're at the stand. I just figured you had something to say.
The hearing list for next week comes out Friday morning. And we don't have a commission meeting on the following Monday evening like we do today. To try to get out in front of the hearing schedule, we'd like to try to do that Friday, although that isn't horribly popular either. But to do this weekly, we've got to try to fit something in on a Friday. There is a Board of Health meeting on Friday at noon here, scheduled from noon to 1:30, and we could try to fit something in at 1:30 if the commission chooses to do so.
That's the wishes of the commission. Commissioner Strand.
The next time there's a legislative session in 2 years, I'd suggest that our city commission look at what the school board does. They have a governance committee that is targeted this task of dealing with legislation. It's a committee of members who want to do that. And then we're not as a committee of the whole doing what a committee could do. I just think that anyway, that's my recommendation. I want to trust our staff. I don't want to micromanage what you're saying, as long as it's not turning upside down what our policies are.
I think the only problem with that, John, is that could only be 2 commissioners. So you could pick one, and then one other of you could discuss it, but it may not be what the governors wants for the whole commission. So that'd be the difficulty with that. Any other business? So 1:30 probably is Friday, what we set up for a tentative meeting at this time. Commissioner Strand?
Is the meeting ending?
Yes, it is.
Well, then when February 19th rolls around, we have to wish Kimber a happy birthday. That's all.
Happy birthday, Kimber. Motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.